He's also pushing U.S. intelligence to find evidence for this theory that the virus was accidentally released from a lab in Wuhan.
Now, something you probably have heard from a certain corner of the right is this theory that the coronavirus, quote, escaped from the lab.
Donald Trump is known for his ridiculous and debunked conspiracies, one of them being this conspiracy that the coronavirus was developed by these mad scientists in a Chinese lab.
The COVID-19 pandemic likely originated from a lab in Wuhan, China.
Throughout the years, the left has perpetrated so many hoaxes it's really hard to keep up with, including shit like Donald Trump is a Russian spy, or the Hunter Biden laptop story is just right-wing propaganda. But their most consequential lie came in the face of the C-19 origin story, which originally reported came from like a bat from the wet market that somebody ate and then sneezed on someone, and that's how we got this whole global scamdemic. And if you didn't believe their original reporting, and you believe maybe an alternative reporting, like it was leaked from the Chinese lab, then you were called a right-wing propagandist.
There's a chance that this was created in a lab. There's an investigation.
A chance?
Well, but
oh my
if there was
God.
evidence, I'd love to hear it.
There's
I just don't know.
a novel respiratory coronavirus overtaking Wuhan, China. What do? Oh, you know who we could ask? The Wuhan novel respiratory coronavirus lab. The disease is the same name as the lab. That's just a little too weird, don't you think? And then they ask those scientists, they're like, how did this, so wait a minute, you work at the Wuhan respiratory coronavirus lab. How did this happen? And they're like, a pangolin kissed a turtle.
There's a shout out to Jon Stewart, basically calling that shit out way back in the day on the Stephen Colbert Show. But he, as many other people, were labeled a conspiracy theorist. And funny thing is, after the U.S. Department of Energy came out with the reality that it was a leak from the Chinese lab, China, of course, denies this, saying that the United States is just trying to smear them. And you have to remember, China is basically the Heath Ledger of origin stories when it comes to C-19. They even went as far as to claim the C-19 virus originated here in the United States as well. And of course, the mainstream media did not put China's feet to the fire. Even the World Health Organization did an investigation, and they came up with, it's highly unlikely the virus leaked from a lab and more research is necessary. So I don't know, feels like too many people around the world just had Trump derangement syndrome that they didn't want to investigate the lab leak thoroughly enough. Now, I imagine that you're a pretty smart person because you are watching Project VOPod, but I want you to imagine yourself as a complete, utter dumbass, okay? You watch CNN, you watch the late night shows on NBC. Perhaps you trust the World Health Organization, you trust the government, you voted for Joe Biden, etc., right? Can you imagine that? Got it? Okay, good. So now the U.S. Department of Energy comes out with this breaking story, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I thought that this was an animal that transmitted it to a human, and that's what I thought that this whole pandemic was all about. But apparently, it was a leak in a Chinese lab, and now all of a sudden, I don't know who to trust, and I don't know what to believe anymore. Well, I'll tell you this: you are not alone, my friend, because even our friends over there at TYT are thinking the same thing.
One thing that's become increasingly clear to me, especially over the last year, is that I don't know who to trust.
Yeah.
Right? I certainly don't trust reporters because reporters treated this initially as if it was nothing more than a crazy, unhinged conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So who do you trust, right? You can't trust the legacy media outlets because that was their narrative. Right-wing media, tends to go in the direction of it was definitely a lab leak. But they have their own biases. So what do you trust?
Yeah.
Who do you trust?
So there you have Anna Kasparian totally reevaluating her whole life as a journalist, man. Having her...
retard alert.
retard alert, class.
Yeah, so there you go, having her be totally unhinged a little bit there. But she does raise a pretty good question there. And the question is, what do we believe in here? Who do we trust? So the question is this: was this leak by accident or was this leak intentional? So if the leak was by accident, I could imagine that maybe somebody contaminated the virus and then went about their life. And I guess this is how we had this whole scamdemic, right? So, okay, cool. That's how accidents happen. Fair enough. Now, if it was intentional, you have to realize that the Chinese government had to have had help in order to get the C-19 virus across the seas, right? And one surefire way they could do that is with the help of the World Health Organization. So the WHO literally teamed up with China in order to figure out if the C-19 virus was transmittable between human to human. So investigations conducted by the Chinese authorities, because they were the leading investigators, had found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel C-19 virus. The World Health Organization literally allowed the Chinese government to investigate themselves. So that seems pretty fishy to me, especially this was coming off of Donald Trump's travel ban, where people were saying, hey, Trump's a racist because he's banning Chinese people from coming to the United States when there's no proof that C-19 is human-to-human transmission, right? So that obviously was a complete lie. Because of that lie, because of their lack of investigation, their lack of effort to get down to the bottom of that question, Donald Trump, of course, decided to defund the World Health Organization. But that didn't last too long, since Joe Biden refunded the World Health Organization after he got into power. And if you guys are paying attention to the world of politics, Joe Biden going back and funding the World Health Organization again should come to no surprise, especially because Joe Biden has a long history of, especially in this administration, bending the knee to the Chinese government. He's no different than Hollywood or the NBA, for that matter. But hell, if you guys still ain't convinced that there's more than likely the Chinese government did release this virus upon the world, Tucker Carlson did bring a virologist onto his show that did work for the Chinese government in that Wuhan lab as well, and this is what she had to say.
We know the Chinese government allowed its infected citizens to travel in huge groups to Western Europe in the early days of the pandemic. That was intentional. But you believe the whole thing, they came up with this virus and they unleashed it on the world to destroy the Western economies and to elevate their own position globally.
I want to emphasize one thing is, I would say, based on the evidence and the source I have, that the lab, virus was intentionally brought out of this strict lab and released in the community. However, I don't think the outbreak in Wuhan was intentional. I would say it was because CCP government and the military scientists underestimate the transmissibility. That's why finally it got out of control and caused the local outbreak. However, we should know that CCP government intentionally to let it go all over the world to kill millions of people all over the world later.
If you made it this far into the video, I'm going to say you are a motherfucking badass right here. But as far as the conclusion goes, man, I'm going to let everybody come to their own conclusion on their own. I just provided information on what I believe is going on with the whole China leak labs and the C-19 virus overall, etc., man. So with all that being said, guys, hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, so that way we can get up to the algorithm and start red-pilling the simps and the libtards here on the internet. And this has been Project V.O. Pod. I'm your host, Jake Varr, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.